We just celebrated PUBG's 8th anniversary. It's been a crazy year since the last best settings guide video that we did back in 2024. A lot has changed since the launch in 2017 and over the last year with the graphics and gameplay. So today we're going to do a quick review of the best settings to use in PUBG, Nvidia control panel, Discord, and Windows for gaming on a high-end and a low-end system. Let's begin. First, I want to give a shout out and a special thanks to a handful of users who helped with testing. We did over 40 hours of testing, trying to hash these settings out and just find the right settings to use for PUBG on both a high-end and low-end system. Huge shout out to Gorf Denro. He's our biggest channel supporter. Been very generous over the years with his time and his knowledge. And also to T-Hogs, Brohanosaurus, Chief and Dudes, and Mike Stan. I know there's many others that we had conversations with, so I appreciate your time. Appreciate you guys supporting this channel, and let's dive in. The first thing that we want to do is right-click on the Start menu in the bottom left corner for Windows 10. Windows 11, you can right-click on the Start menu and select Device Manager. It's going to open up this menu here. We want to scroll down to System Devices, High Precision Event Timer, right click on that and hit Disable. Next, we want to disable any unnecessary startup applications that boot up with your computer. To do this, right click on the taskbar and go to Task Manager and select Startup. You can disable a bunch of different things in here that don't need to be running all the time when you first boot up your machine. Copilot you'll find on Windows 10 and Windows 11. You can disable that. If you want to use it, you can always turn it on later on. Now we're going to verify Windows Game Mode is enabled. To do this, right click on the Start menu, click on Settings, search Game Mode. Either one of these options will work. And this is the same for Windows 10 and Windows 11. And verify that it's enabled here. While we're in the settings, let's go ahead and search mouse settings. Make sure that acceleration is turned off. We're going to search mouse settings and click on additional mouse options. It's going to open up another box. Select the third tab over here, pointer options. And make sure this box here is unchecked. You do not want to have this on. Mouse acceleration essentially speeds up your mouse sensitivity the faster that you move your mouse, and it will cause a lot of inconsistencies when you're trying to play video games, especially first-person shooters. Definitely recommend to turn this off. Let's make sure Windows is set to use the maximum power settings by right-clicking on the Start menu, going to Power Options, and then let's select additional power settings. Look for a high performance plan. You're likely going to find it under the Show Additional Plans if you've never clicked on this before. So make sure to select that and then change plan settings and change advanced power settings. Under this option, you're going to see a couple of things we want to change in here. I would strongly recommend to turn off hibernation and sleep. This is an old Windows glitch, but sometimes when you're returning from sleep or hibernation, certain functions won't turn back on and can cause some issues with gaming. But in this case, we're specifically looking for USB and select USB selective suspend setting and make sure that it's disabled. Next, we're going to pull up Nvidia control panel. There's a couple ways you can get here. You can right click on the desktop and click on Nvidia control panel on Windows 10. On Windows 11, you're going to see an additional option down here at the bottom that says more settings, and then you'll be able to click on Nvidia control panel. Or you can type it in at the bottom down here, type in Nvidia into the search and pull up the Nvidia control panel settings. If you want to set these settings up specifically only for PUBG, you can do so by clicking on Program Settings, click Add, look for TLS Game, and click on Add Selected Program. This will allow you to change these settings just for PUBG if you play other games and don't want to affect them. All right, the first setting we're going to look at in Nvidia control panel is image scaling. Most users are going to have this off, but if you are on a lower end machine and have a 1920 by 1080 monitor, what you can do is you can turn this on at about, say, 20%, and then go into PUBG and set a resolution that's under 1920 by 1080, and the image scaling will actually display something better than the resolution you're on and closer to 1920 by 1080. Ambient occlusion is off for both low-end or high-end machines. Unless you're making something cinematic, you typically want to have it off. It does really make lighting pop, but is not necessary and can be a little bit overwhelming when you're trying to find targets quickly. Anisotropic filtering, we typically want this on application controlled, which basically means that it's going to be controlled by PUBG's in-game setting. FXAA, we're going to have as off, gamma correction on. Anti-aliasing mode, once again, we want to have this one on application controlled so PUBG's settings can actually change this setting. Transparency off. Max frame rate. I typically recommend to have this off, but if you're on a lower end machine, this might be a good setting to have on if you are alt-tabbing often. CUDA GPUs usually want to have set to all. The fallback policy you could select as driver default. If you are on a 14th generation Intel machine and are still experiencing the 3-hour crash that was patched quite some time ago, you can try turning this setting to prefer no system fallback. Next, we have DSR factors. If you have a 1920 by 1080 monitor and you want to play PUBG in a 2K resolution, which is 2560 by 1440, you can turn this setting on at 15 to 30% smoothness and then go into PUBG and select 2K resolution and be able to play in a higher resolution than your monitor can actually output. I believe this is only available on a 3000 and 4000 series Nvidia graphics cards at the moment. If you are not trying to do that, do not have the setting on. The setting should not be on unless you are trying to run in a higher resolution than your monitor can actually output. Low latency mode. Typically I recommend to have this as on. If you are experiencing stutters or hiccups, next try ultra. Or if that still is causing FPS issues or stutters, then try it as off. What this does is it reduces the latency by limiting the number of frames the CPU can prepare ahead of time. Max frame rate, most users should have this off. If you are using G-Sync or FreeSync monitors, some people do recommend to have this enabled and to be 1 frame, if not 5 to 10 frames below your max monitor's refresh rate. So if you have a 240 gigahertz monitor, to put it at 239 or maybe even as low as 225 for the best stability with using G-Sync and FreeSync. For competitive gamers, having a higher stable FPS may be more valuable even with a slightly higher latency, which is what I personally recommend, and I've gone through testing and that's where I ended up at. So I personally recommend keeping this off even if you are using G-Sync and FreeSync. MFAA is off. I do use G-Sync as I mentioned a moment ago, so I do have that enabled here. If you don't have a G-Sync monitor, you will not see that line here in NVIDIA control panel. GDI I have as auto, rendering as auto select. Power management mode, doesn't matter if you're using a high-end or a low-end unit machine. I would recommend to have as prefer maximum performance. Preferred refresh rate, you definitely want to have this set to highest available. Shader cache size, and this is more of a preference. You can do driver default if you've got the space for it on the C drive. If you've got like 100 gigs, let's say, available, and you always will have 100 gigs available, You can set this to 100 gigs. It does use up a lot of space over time, but driver default is perfectly fine. Anisotropic sample optimizations, we want to have that as off. Negative LOD bias, this is a tricky one. There's a couple different options to routes you can go on this one. Clamp is typically the best option, specifically for PUBG. Clamp typically provides a better image quality and can help reduce texture aliasing like jagged edges or shimmering textures. If you do use allow, you also want to have anti-aliasing and textures on something like ultra in-game, because they're going to help minimize the negative effects of overall. Clamp is typically, though, the best option for visuals and smoothness. If you are experiencing FPS stutters, though, after watching this guide, try the latter option. This may be a specific option you want to change. Texture filtering, I use quality. If you're on a lower end machine, you can use performance. You will see a decent drop, though, in visual quality in the game. Optimization, you want to have as on. Threaded optimization, auto. Triple buffering off. Vertical sync, also known as VSync. Most users are going to have this as off. If you are using a G-Sync or FreeSync monitor, I found the best settings to have is to be application controlled. That way in PUBG, you can enable VSync if you'd like to. For me personally, I found the best settings for G-Sync monitor that I use is to use low latency mode as on instead of ultra. Have VSync enabled in PUBG and Nvidia control panel set to 3D application setting. So simply said, if you have a G-Sync monitor, you might want to consider turning this to application controlled. If you do not, I would turn this to off. The last thing we want to do is check and see if resize bar is enabled. To do this, you can click on system information. And you'll see resize bar is enabled, yes. This is strictly if you are still experiencing stutters or hiccups in PUBG. You can download something called Nvidia Profile Inspector. Looks like this here. I'll put the GitHub link in the details. If you scroll down to the common section, you want to check while we're in here, make sure power management mode is set to prefer maximum performance. But what we're going to do is do R-bar enable. Drop that down and select enable. Under options, you want to select the one that ends in 1, typically. And then the size limit, you want to set this one to the one with the 4. And they're very small. And then once you're done, right at the top right, you want to click on apply settings. Once again, I would only do this if you're continuing to have stuttering issues in PUBG. Some users on Windows 11 experienced worse performance after enabling this function on the back end. A couple other additional things to do on Windows 10. You want to turn off game bar or Xbox game bar. You can do that by finding it here under game bar settings. Do not click on game bar. You want to look for game bar settings specifically and turn it off right here. On Windows 11, it's going to be significantly more tricky. You'll actually have to search something called PowerShell, also known as terminal on Windows 11. Right click and run it as an administrator. You're going to get a pop-up that says, do you want to allow this app to make changes to your device? Hit yes. And enter this code, which I'll share with you in the description here. You typically want to run this once or twice. This will completely remove Xbox Game Bar Overlay, which is known for causing FPS and stuttering issues, because it also has a video recorder that can record gameplay. If you are not experiencing any issues, I would not recommend removing this on Windows 11. Some users have reported after removing Xbox Game Bar that it introduced new stutters and new hiccups into the system. Let's take a look at Steam's launch options. So for PUBG, and you can actually use this on all games on Steam. We're going to right click on PUBG and go to properties. Minus high would be the one that you want to use there. One other additional one that's not currently in rotation, but it may be back in the future, is no vid. This will turn off the video that loads to help your game start up a little bit faster. All right, let's dive into the best PUBG settings to use. Let's click on the gear in the top right. Settings. Display mode, typically you want to always use full screen. If you use borderless or windowed, you may not get the highest refresh rate that your monitor can actually output. I strongly always recommend to have full screen. Resolution is really just dependent on whatever your monitor is. If you're using DSR factors, once again, you have a this is only for people who are using a 1920 by 1080 monitor and want to use a 2K resolution. You can turn on DSR factors in Nvidia control panel and select the higher resolution here. FPS cap. When it comes to the FPS cap, if you're on a lower machine, I think that can make a difference. Like a lobby FPS cap can make a difference to help prevent it from working too hard when you're doing other things or alt tabbed. Otherwise, unlimited is fine. Same with the in-game FPS cap. I spoke about this earlier when using G-Sync. I found the best settings is to not limit the in-game FPS, but some users may want to do that, like putting a max of 225 when they're using G-Sync, as we spoke about earlier. Smooth frame rate, I recommend to have as disabled. I personally like 75 for the brightness. I find it's a good balance. All right, the advanced tab, render scale. If you have a higher end machine, you could raise this to 120 for a better image quality. After testing though, we found that using settings lower than 100 actually caused stuttering when using a higher end machine. If you're on a lower end machine and you're trying to get a little bit extra performance, you could try like 80, but it is going to make the game look pretty rough. FPP, I would strongly recommend that the field of vision be 103. You always want to have the biggest field of vision. Anti-aliasing and post-processing, if you're on a higher end machine, I recommend ultra still for both these settings. If you're on a lower end machine, I would recommend low. There's very little difference between very low and low. One thing to keep in mind is if you are having your processor get taxed or overtaxed and it's locking up from that, you definitely want to lower this setting. If you're on a higher end machine though, you're probably not going to run into that. Shadows, after our testing, I would recommend very low. It definitely does have some benefits. You know, you can see when people are, you know, peeking over the top of a roof and they have a shadow, but just the overall FPS loss and the stability loss that you get with having shadows on really isn't worth it. Textures, I recommend as ultra for high end and low for low end. Once again, not much difference between low and very low, so I would recommend use low. Effects, this is going to be one that is significantly different compared to last year. I would recommend low for everyone. This one is huge. Since PUBG updated destructible terrain, effects have been a major cause for FPS stutters, hiccups, crashes. Doesn't matter if it's a high-end or low-end computer, it's all above. A lot of issues with effects, especially when you're playing on Sandhawk. PUBG actually put out something that recommends not to use high or ultra effects when playing Sandhawk. Foliage, I recommend low. If it's higher, you can literally load all the trees in the map, which is very unnecessary. You'll see that here when we turn this on to ultra, this will start loading all of the foliage for the entire map. It is not worth it, not worth the resources. Another big one that's different from last year is the view distance. Previously, I used to recommend that this setting be on high or ultra, because the higher the view distance, it would make the items load in sooner and give you dibs when you're landing in a hot drop. Unfortunately, this one had a side effect along with the effects update that caused something that we describe as loot lag, which basically means when you're dragging loot into your backpack or into your inventory, that it doesn't pick it up. So you find yourself dragging it multiple times and it still won't go into your backpack. So for this reason, recommend low. It's far enough that most stuff will load in as you're hitting the ground, but you won't experience as much loot lag. Sharpen, I recommend is on. There's a very little difference between FPS drops or FPS differences when this is on. If you are running around in like maps like Destiny looking at the fence, you may notice a difference when looking at some of the fences. I would just kind of turn this on or off based on preference. VSync, most users, once again, this should be off just like the Nvidia control panel. Once again, if you're using G-Sync, you may want to enable this. With my G-Sync settings, this is something that I do have enabled. Motion blur, absolutely everybody should have this off. There's no reason why you'd want to have this on. And DirectX version, this is another huge one. DirectX 11 is no longer the base. DirectX 11 Enhanced now is the starting point. Previously, 11 and 12, users experienced FPS glitches, stuttering, hiccups, all of the above. That is now the case if you're using DirectX 11. So I would strongly recommend that absolutely everybody go to DirectX 11 Enhanced or try 12 to see if it works okay in your system. Sound. A lot of this is just personal preference, but select lobby music. I strongly recommend the early access lobby. I think it's the best tune that they've had yet. Though the PUBG 8th anniversary one is also pretty good as well, as is the main title, but lobby is my all-time favorite. It's the best. I definitely recommend to have HRTF on. Weapon sound effects. This one is very much a personal preference. You've got remastered. It's going to have different weapon sounds for the M4, 249, Kar 98 SPS versus the Legacy. Voice chat. Your PUBG input mode should always be push to talk. Always. If you're using an open microphone, that is something that you should be doing in Discord, not in PUBG. Please, for God's sake, save us all. If you're going to disregard that suggestion and use an open microphone, please at least go then through the Windows microphone setup so that you can properly set up your microphone so we don't hear everything in your background. Nobody appreciates a teammate who is blasting all of their background through their audio microphone. Controls. I still use general sensitivity 43 in PUBG. This is definitely personal preference though. The one thing I would recommend against using though is vertical sensitivity multiplier. I know there are some pros that do use a multiplier in this case. If you're trying to get consistency across just gaming in general though, this is definitely a crutch that's going to hurt you in other games. Along with the fact that it has a lot of other variables when you have it enabled, causes a lot of other things to not be simple and straightforward. Consistency is going to be affected if you use vertical sensitivity multiplier for sure. Additionally, when it comes to sensitivity and sensitivity settings, I use mouse acceleration off in Windows with Windows sensitivity 6, DPI 800, PUBG in-game sensitivity 43, along with a mouse control pad. And currently using a Pulsar Axelite V3 ES mouse with 400 hertz in the wireless dongle, the 2mm liftoff, and the motion disabled. Key input method. Crouch. I personally use this on toggle. I know a lot of people have recently been switching this over to hold. It definitely is a big preference thing. I think it can be a good thing to have if you're able to get hold down, though you end up spamming it. Don't be one of those people that use the glitch right now where you can toggle stand up crouch all within a half a second. Don't be one of those people. Let's be better than that, folks. Prone, I do recommend as a toggle, but walk and sprint and free look, hold the breath, all of these are simple settings that you can use as a hold. Can't at sight, if you're really using them that often, which most people aren't, I think a toggle is nice. Aim and ADS though, these two specific settings, these are a must. Strongly recommend that these are hold. you're able to ADS much faster if you have aim or ADS on as a hold versus using a toggle. Key bindings, common. We specifically want to look at jump vault. Strongly recommend to have these as separate keys by default. That does come as the dual key. You want to change that to jump only and like vault to be a different key. This will allow you to jump into window seals and get different angles that you normally wouldn't be able to get because you'd vault right out of the window, or be able to jump on top of an object instead of vaulting over the wall, stuff like that. We scroll down as well. We're gonna see delete mark. This one very specifically is extremely helpful, especially in squads, but I would say overall in duos as well. When you mark something, sometimes your marker is blocking the view. Say if you're trying to mark somebody, there's a guy in this window here and you mark it. Sometimes the marker will block the view for your teammates. You need to know what your delete marker key is. By default, it is deleted, but it's very useful one to know. Inventory radio message. This is how you 3D mark as well. That's how you ping something. You can look in your backpack, or let's say if you're missing a tip on your firearm, you can click it and it'll actually mark. I am looking for a compensator. I'm looking for a suppressor, something like that. Select item quantity. This one here is very useful for when you're trying to cut items to share meds with a teammate, or let's say if you're in a car, you want to put stuff in the trunk. What you do is you open up your inventory, which is for me in this case is tab. You drag the item while holding left control. You drag the item from your inventory into the trunk of the car, and then you get a pop-up message that says what you want to actually cut into the car. Last thing to look at down here is your voice chat input method. This is how you talk in game. And then your instant volume reducer. This is very useful if you want to lower the volume of, like say, vehicles when you're driving around so that you can hear teammates. It's extremely helpful. Key bindings, combat. Specifically, we want to look at aim and ADS. You should not be using this key at all. When you do aim/ADS, you have to aim first and then ADS, which is the slowest ADS path. You'll probably be killed most of the time just trying to get to the ADS level. Aim essentially is like a soft aim. ADS is aimed on sights. You definitely want to separate those keys. I don't actually personally use aim at all. I only use ADS. You can hip fire, which means you're not soft aiming or ADSing. You can hip fire at a pretty good distance without actually aiming down your sights at all. A lot of people don't know that, but it's pretty easy. You gotta definitely try it out. Radio message wheel. This is another thing that's going to be tied into the inventory weapon or inventory management. For me, it's mouse 3. That's how you mark things on the map. Mark that there's an enemy there. Zeroing did get updated, by the way, so that you can now zero at 6x. That's relatively new. Thanks. Shout out to the person over on YouTube there that informed me of that. And then the last section here I want to go over is meds. I strongly recommend to have keys that you can use to heal quickly. So I've got separate keys for medkit, first aid. If you use heal item or boost item, these will take the largest heal item or the largest boost item down to the smallest. So biggest first, down to smallest. So for a heal item, it's going to do a med kit, first aid, then a bandage in that order. For boost item, it's going to do adrenaline syringe, painkiller, and then energy drink. A quick side note when it comes to inventory management, adrenaline syringe takes up 20 space in your backpack. A painkiller takes up 10 space in your backpack, and an energy drink takes up 4, which means that for one adrenaline syringe, if you carried an adrenaline syringe, that's either 2 painkillers or 5 energy drinks. When you're looking at the overall strategy, in thinking late game, you generally want to have the ability to be boosted through the entire game. one of the benefits of carrying, let's say, a ton of energy drinks is that once your boost items go from max boost down to half, you can use an energy drink to go back up to max. Otherwise, if you're really trying to maximize your boosting, you'd have to wait until your boost actually goes all the way down to 0 in order to use the syringe. Vehicle, this one's going to be pretty short. Really the only thing that you really need to be aware of in here is I would recommend to use for move to seat 2, use that as E. So it's typically seat 2 is in the front right, which E is typically the lean button, the lean right. And likewise, to move to seat 3 is the back left, which Q is your lean left. This will allow you to, when you're driving cars, if you're holding W, to switch seats so that the car continues to progress in that same direction. But you can switch seats and then shoot out of the car. Gameplay interface. Inventory character render. This one's going to be something that could be a big drag on your system, especially if you're using a low-end machine. I would recommend to switch this off because it will cause stuttering and hiccuping, and it can make your inventory take longer to load. If you have a higher end machine, I think it benefits to have it on because you can look at your character to see if you have a bright colored vest or backpack enabled. So I think it does have some benefits, but once again, lower end machine, definitely turn that off. When it comes to the crosshair, this is 100% personal preference. I prefer the green. I'm very used to it, but a lot of like CS players or Valorant players I like to use a red or pink crosshair because it doesn't match many colors in the game. When it comes to the compass background, I do have this typically as disabled. And then one other thing that I want to point out here, which is super helpful, is the loot flash effect. By default, this is on pulse. I strongly recommend using glow. You're going to see some of the benefits here of having this as a glow when you're running around and looking at recommended ammo types and recommended gear. Not having something that's constantly moving on your screen because it's very distracting to you. Whether or not you realize it or not, it'd be very distracting. Glow is only going to show you something that is better than the items that you already have, and it's going to glow. So it's always going to be glowing versus it's going to be pulsing. All right, function. A lot of this is personal preference. I would recommend to turn off auto reload though, or secondary default firing mode for ARs. You know, this is like M16 specifically. You have the single and burst. I think putting it on single first is the way to go, as well as the default firing mode for DMRs would be full auto for an MK14 or not. Having it auto replace attachments or auto attach attachments, I think is a really useful thing. This is something that we waited a long time for. It was an Apex from like day one, but it auto equips them essentially when you interact with it or from the inventory. Auto replace weapon skin. I like to have this one disabled because you can easily add your own weapon skin by, for me, it's left alt, left shift, and then right click will replace it. But this gives you the opportunity to look and inspect other weapon skins from other people that might be really cool that you want to check out. Additional action queuing, you definitely want to have this enabled. I can help queue up different things, make your transition between your character animations very smooth. And then here is the spot that goes in correlation with specifically with the loot flash effect. I strongly recommend not having ammo as a recommended highlight. The reason is ammo is everywhere. You're gonna have stuff highlighted all the time and everywhere. On the flip side of that, recommended equipment, this one you do want to have on. This would recommend if you have a level 2 vest and you see a level 3 one that is not completely broken, it will recommend it to you. Same with attachments. So, one of the things that you can do that I do often, if I'm looking for a compensator but I have a flash hider, I'll put the flash hider in my inventory and I'll run around and I'll do fast looting where I'm just looking for the recommended items. And then it's going to recommend other tips for like an M4. And I can find the compensator or find the attachment that I'm looking for quite quickly. Delay exit from moving vehicles. This one's actually kind of funny. We did multiple videos on this one. I think it was last year actually, but this was enabled or added to the game because there was a glitch where when people would start bandaging, it would eject them from the vehicle. Strongly recommend to have this in there, but it will make doing like C4 car actions a little bit more difficult. But once you hit 60 or above kilometers per hour, it's going to give you a 3-second countdown to exit the vehicle. Last but not least, definitely recommend saving to the cloud. Something to keep in mind though is this will not save all of your settings. So if you have very specific settings like I do, I definitely take pictures of them with my cell phone so that I can reference them at a later time. But I would strongly recommend that you save them to the cloud, or you can back them up on Steam under the user data. All right, next we're going to review Discord settings. Let's go ahead and open up user settings by clicking on the gear and scroll down to voice and video. Under here, we're going to look for hardware acceleration and make sure that that's turned off. If you scroll a little bit farther down, you're also going to see enable quality of enable quality of service high packet priority. Turn that off as well. And then turn off both these options here. Use our advanced technology to capture screen and experimental method to capture audio. You don't need any of those settings on, especially the hardware acceleration can take away from the more important things, and you don't need a hardware acceleration in Discord at all. The next thing I want to review in Discord is the advanced tab. Go ahead and go over to advanced. You're going to see hardware acceleration again in here. You want to make sure you turn them off in both places. It's very important to do that. This next one here is going to be geared more specifically around content creators and streamers, but I would say in general teammates. And if you like to chat with people in game, it is really important and also very simple to set up these keybinds. And what these keybinds do is it pushes to mute. So mouse 4 is my button to talk to people in game when I'm running around to global chat. So if I'm holding mouse 4, it mutes Discord for me so that I can't talk in Discord and in game at the same time. This is very helpful. Everybody who wants to talk in game should do this. You don't want to be having your voice go over 2 audio streams. It's very annoying. Likewise, and even more importantly for streamers, they have the other action as well, which is another button that doesn't talk in game, but also mutes Discord temporarily. A lot of people have binds set up where it completely turns off voice and or deafens completely. It's a terrible thing to use. Teammates are talking to you, they think you're hearing them, and you're muted. It's not good practice. Use a push to mute. Mouse 3 on my mouse here, button here, allows me to push to mute myself in Discord so I can still hear people talking. I'm also not talking in game, but then I can talk to chat without being interrupted or interrupting other people, more importantly. Be respectful to your other content creators if you're streaming with someone. Your chat is for you and you alone, so be mindful of that. The last thing, this one is more of a personal preference, but is game overlay. I strongly recommend to turn this off. This has actually been known for causing FPS stutters, drops. I've actually seen some information come across that it can cause input lag as well. So I strongly recommend not using that, but it really comes down to preference. If there's no issues that you see having it on, you'd like to use it on, go ahead and keep it on. To show you an example of what this looks like, we're going to pop into the channel here and start talking. You see that my voice is being picked up. If I hit the mouse button, it mutes Discord while I'm holding it and lets go. If I go back and I hit my other key, mouse 3, it's going to do the same thing, saying that I'm muted on Discord. So I can talk to chat very easily. As soon as I let off the button, I'm just going to go back and resume speaking. One last thing to talk about. We did a lot of testing with this on Windows 10, Windows 11. I would strongly recommend, at least for now, Nvidia's driver 560.94 if you're using an Nvidia graphics card. It's a very stable driver. It's actually the driver that Windows installs by default now on Windows 10 and Windows 11 when you do a fresh install. It's not a new driver though. It actually came out in August of 2024, so it's been out for a long time. We did have some users on YouTube follow up and say that they found that 566.03 was also a very stable driver, specifically when using an older Nvidia graphics card, the 2070. It's not an old graphics card, it's a very good graphics card. But so the newest Nvidia driver is not always the best for PUBG. PUBG is a very unoptimized old game. Old but great. We all love this game. If you guys haven't yet, please do me a huge favor. Drop a follow if you enjoyed this video. Share a comment, share it with a friend. The goal here is to try to help everybody be able to enjoy the game in a more stable manner. And it means a lot to me to see your comments. So I'd love to hear your feedback, good or bad. And if you find something, share it. Let this be a community where you can share comments and updates. Everybody's got different hardware, so things do react a little bit differently, and sharing is caring. Thank you all, and we'll see you guys on the battlefield.